What's the hardest lesson you ever had to learn?
Soul teachers.
Conversations that reach deep into the soul.
We provide a place for our guests to tell stories that seek the sacred, allow space for transformation.
Create a tolerant community.
It's
Soul
Soul
Teacher.
Teachers.
So I'm talking with Eric Ling in Ohio. He's been teaching at a private Christian school in Ohio for a decade, and he's a certified rock star. First as a member of the folk band Bethesda with a rootsy rock vibe, and now with an indie pop band with his wife Shanna in By Light We Loom. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So your kids are being interviewed today by Channel 19 CBS. That's exciting. How did that go?
Yeah, it went really well. Yeah, my students run their own business where they import products from Rwanda. And so my students have been working on trying to get press for the business. And so this was a big get for them to be on the local news is pretty exciting. So they were pumped.
You know, one of the fascinating things I found was when I saw that you're working with something called Shia. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So when I inherited the School of Business, was asked to take it over. First of all, I have zero business training at all. So I'm just a teacher, and I like doing projects and authentic experiences. And so they're like, "Hey, this program's not doing so hot." So when I took it over, I kind of walked into this giant closet full of the stuff, and kind of found this whole set of bags that had been dropped off. And I found out later that a father of a student at our school had been to Rwanda, met these women who were survivors of the genocide, bought a bunch of their bags, brought it back to CVCA and gave them to us. Said, "Hey, can you guys do something with this?" And about a year and a half had gone by and nothing had really happened. I was like, "Man, we could build something behind this." And one of the things I'm really passionate about is not doing business for selfish gain. We can teach students how to do business and show that it can make a difference in the world. So basically, the overview is my students now and their juniors apply for executive positions in our business, Shia Design, student-run business. And so they go through a full interview process. I bring in HR representatives to interview them, so it's super intimidating. I always tell them I wouldn't want to be interviewed by these people. So it's intimidating, but it's a professional interview. And then they get jobs based on that interview. So they have to apply for separate occupations, and then they literally, I think this is kind of the part that's really made it take off. It's theirs. Like it's their legacy. I'm like, this is your business. You build everything. Like I'm going to be the safety net. I'm going to let you fall, but I'll catch you before you fall too far and you get injured. But so I'll be that for you, but everything else is up to you. And
Wow.
so they import these goods. So they place the order, import these goods from Rwanda, which in and of itself is fun when my students are talking to, Rwandan port authorities on the phone in class. It's like, that's a pretty unique thing, So they import these bags, and then they name the business. They call it Shia Designs. They create the marketing for it. They run the accounting and the finances for it, and they try to get sales. And then it's a nonprofit organization, so the money that they get, they take and go and buy more bags. And so we started off, our first year was rough, but we made about $1,300 in sales. In our second year, we're about $2,000. Last year's group got it to $10,000.
Wow.
And this group, in their first 2 years, first 2 months has already gotten over 5,000. So they're on track to make $20,000 this year in sales.
Whoa.
Which is crazy to put that on your resume that you ran a $20,000 business.
Yeah.
But what's even cooler, and this is the part I'm most proud about, is my students, because of their work, these survivors of the genocide. It's a co-op in Rwanda. People who are putting roofs over their multi-generational families' heads with their parents, grandparents, kids, grandkids. Those women they were able to hire 3 additional people because of my students' work. So 3 more people can put that roof over their kids' heads and send their kids to school. And so that's hyper motivating for my students. and has resulted in a whole lot of opportunities. Like we are talking earlier, getting on the news.
Yeah.
The press is kind of picking up with this and running with it,
Yep.
and the students are using it to get scholarships and get into colleges. So it's been a lot of fun.
That is really awesome. And just listening to your voice, the excitement that you have as a teacher, that totally makes sense. And that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about you and how you got here. Where did you grow up? And can you tell me a bit about your childhood?
Yeah, so I grew up in Belle Fountain, Ohio, and I was the youngest of 8 kids. So yeah, it was a wild thing. My childhood is defined by a couple of things. First, like complete unabashed freedom, where I could just leave the house and go out in the woods and do whatever, and nobody even knew I was gone, because that's the benefit of being the youngest of 8. The second is I was a part of a pretty hyper fundamentalist religious group. And so a lot of the things that other people have experienced in their childhood, I didn't get to experience because they were kind of banned for me.
So, such as what?
Like I wasn't allowed to watch TV or listen to secular music, and we had an emphasis on the apocalypse, so constantly talking about the end times. And so that was always on the forefront of everything that we did, even as kids. We always joke. My dad, other people's dads would tell them bedtime stories, and my dad would like go over the signs of the apocalypse. He's like, make sure you're ready. Like, if rapture happens tonight. So I was equal parts terrified and equal parts having a blast, not even knowing that this wasn't normal for everybody else.
Yeah. So when you look back on your first 10 years of teaching, because you've obviously been teaching there at Cuyahoga Valley Christian Academy now for 10 years, I'm sort of wanting to hone in on your teaching philosophy, because I'm sure that having come through this sort of experience, you probably have had those experiences make an impact on how you teach. So when you look back on your first 10 years of teaching, what are 3 things that stand out to you, like moments that you would say define your teaching philosophy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to narrow it down, so I'll kind of give you an overview of the philosophy first, and then kind of break down a couple of moments that I think where it helped define that. So I guess my main philosophy is one of compassion for students. And that sounds kind of like a loaded term, but what I mean by that is simply that recognizing that students, even though I might not think that what they're going through is that big of a deal, like a breakup with another 16-year-old, like you're gonna be fine. But recognizing that in that moment, that's a really important and even kind of traumatic experience for them. So kind of having that sense of like, I've been in your shoes. To go to a defining moment is probably the first one is probably my entire middle school to early high school experience of being a kid who felt things very profoundly. Like I distinctly remember being in the cafeteria and looking around, seeing all these people have these discussions and thinking that every single one of those discussions, and truly believing every single one of them was about me. Like they were making fun of me in some way, shape, or form, which is so egocentric. Like that's so absurd.
Yeah.
But it rattled me, and like that informed the way that I behaved in school. And so I became a shell of myself. Like people who know me now know that I'm pretty outgoing. I am joyful. I love having conversations with people. But when I was in middle school and early high school, I was not that. I was quiet. I was scared. I was nervous. I was anxious all the time. So that kind of like looking back on that now that I'm a teacher, realizing when a kid's acting out, there's probably very little to do with me as a teacher. It probably has a whole lot more to do with what they're experiencing. So that informs the way that I build relationships with students, to listen and make a conscientious effort to ask questions so that I can listen. So that's probably the first major experience. The second thing is when I first started teaching, I became a came in as a 7th grade history teacher, and my students were just berserk. They were insane, and so I remember one day kind of having it. I was done. I was fed up, and now that I'm a little more experienced, I know that was on me. I didn't manage my classroom well, but I totally put it on the kid. And so I remember screaming at my class, like just losing it. And every single person in the class was like, blown back in their seats because they'd never seen me lose my cool yet. And so fast forward a couple years later, I was talking to a senior student, and his sister had been in that very 7th grade class. And he's like, she is still terrified of you because of that moment. That moment right there. And the crazy thing is she was the good one. Like she was such a good student, but she felt that so profoundly, and it impacted, shaped her experience of like, holy smokes, like I need to get a handle on this thing.
Yeah.
So my classroom management style has become a lot more student to student or student to teacher, one-on-one. Like, hey, if you're acting out in my class, it's a quick conversation. It always starts with a question. I'm always like, hey, what's going on? Because if I ask that question instead of starting with the accusation, I'll get a whole lot more out of it. So that's probably the second moment. And I think the third moment is when after my master's program, so I got a master's degree in evaluation and measurement, and I learned the power of data. And I had a professor kind of challenge us. He said, look at your grade book and ask what it communicates to you. And if you don't know why you're grading something, or it doesn't have a purpose, it doesn't communicate learning to you, then you should get rid of it immediately. And I was like, whoa. But that actually made a lot of sense to me. Like, I had a lot of fat in my education or in my curriculum. So just cutting out things that don't tell me anything about student learning and kind of focusing in on the things that really do, and help me build some programs over time that can be kind of project-based and authentic and a lot of fun and engaging, without having all this kind of busy work as a part of it. So.
Wow. I think that whole concept of empathy and listening, I can still remember for me the moment when I was told, I think I was in Los Angeles at the time, I was told, your sarcasm isn't helping. And it was, I think, a really important thing for me was that sort of realizing that you've got to be the one understanding how kids see you, how kids see their world. That's really, really insightful. So we're going to take a break. Our guest is Eric Ling, and we're going to be back. Thank you very much. Are you looking to sell your house? You can't do better than Windermere on Vashon, and in particular, Mary Margaret Briggs, Realtor at Windermere. When my wife and I decided to sell our house, I went straight to Mary Margaret. She supports the arts and education here in our little town. In fact, when my students didn't go to her to buy an ad, she sent me a reminder. As our agent, she has gone over and above. She actually came out and weeded our flower beds during the final rush. Plus, the house was gorgeously staged. So when you sell your house, go with the best. Go with Mary Margaret Briggs and start your next chapter with Windermere. So I'm here with Eric Ling. He's a musician, a highly recognized high school business teacher in Ohio who's also married to his creative partner in music, Shanna Delaney. Welcome back, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wasn't going to say this, but I think I will anyway. I am also married to my own partner she's a writer and I'm a writer, so I know a little bit about what it's like. I know both the negatives and the positives in terms of working with somebody that you are that close to. So that's one of the things I'm just really curious about. Like, how has that worked out for you in terms of working with what have been some of the experiences that you've had in terms of working with someone that closely and also being married to her?
Yeah, it's actually it's one of the hardest things that I've been through, especially creatively, but also the most rewarding, if that makes sense. So the hard part is just trying to learn how to communicate about things that have been private for so long. Like creativity is something very personal.
Uh,
Um, and so for me, I'd always, all the way through high school and college, I wrote my own songs. I was not trained in any way, shape, or form in anything, not in guitar, not in singing. So I would just kind of screech out a song, and that sounded good to me, and that was art. I like valued the fact that it didn't sound great, like that made it authentic. And then the person I fell in love with and married is vocally trained. She was in musical theater for a while, and she can just meld it. She's just got a voice of an angel, and had again her own kind of very I guess formulated approach to creativity and creative expression. So I remember it was on our honeymoon. We're kind of in a pool in Mexico, and we're hanging out and talking about life. And she just kind of swam up to me, and she was crying. She had tears in her eyes. And her sophomore year, she had given up musical theater to pursue teaching. She's an educator as well, and so she had tears in her eyes, and she's like, "Hey, I need music in my life. Like that has to be a part of what I do." And so I was like, "Hey, when we get home, we're gonna start a band." But I had no
wow.
idea I had no idea what I was getting into, but we did. We got home and we started writing together, and because it was so new in our marriage, like our writing together taught us how to communicate
Hmm.
to one another. Like she had to learn how to tell me that I couldn't sing very well in a nice way, and I
That's
and I had
impressive.
yeah, yeah, and I had to learn how to hear her opinions and integrate them into the song, and to truly try to really support what she does well. I had to accept that, and so we were forced to kind of compromise by this band we created. And
Yes.
so we always joke that we should start a marriage counseling where we force couples to start a band together. you know you'll get all your issues out. Like, yeah, there's some pretty heated fights, but when you're fighting about things you care about so
Yes.
much, you don't hold anything back. So we got to know each other really quickly, and now we've been doing music together for a little over a decade now, and like I wouldn't have it any other way. We are a finely tuned, well-oiled machine. Like we know how to work together. In fact, now we're just a duo. It used to be six of us. Now it's
Yeah.
just her and I. So there's literally no other opinion in the room. But we just have a blast doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it does help you communicate when you're working on something that you absolutely have to be honest about. Like you cannot fake when it comes to the work. You've got to be real. And I do think it's unusual. I mean, I was reflecting earlier in the afternoon with my producer that about couples that work together. I mean, I know Karen and Linford from Over the Rhine. I think Johnny Cash and June Carter. Do you think that there are a lot of couples who work like this together?
I think like I don't know. This is just anecdotal, just based on my observation of the world. But my assumption is that most people actually kind of avoid it, right? People, and this is kind of my gut reaction. So I don't know how true it is of other people because I just know what I know. But people like to have their kind of spheres. Like this is the thing that I love, and then this is the thing that you love, and so you have your sphere, I have my sphere, and then
Hmm.
here's where these two things we love overlap, and
Hmm.
that's our time together. So things kind of become compartmentalized, and it's probably pretty blissful, I imagine, in those areas. But I think it also you can kind of get lost. And so, you get lost in the thing you love and you forget about the part where things intersect. And so what we do, what you do, and what I do is hard. But like the output, the benefit we get from it is pretty incredible. So I think it's a very unique thing. And I think it takes a lot of just a commitment to the person and to the work that is, that's difficult to ask of one another.
No, you're absolutely right. So By Light We Loom, that's the name of your band. There's a storytelling aspect to your band, the Cleveland Plain Dealer says. What does that mean? How do stories play into your music?
They're everything. So I can't write a song about something that I don't believe in and something that isn't true, something that doesn't resonate with me. To me, writing songs is a very therapeutic thing. It's the way I process, and to me it's a very spiritual thing because I feel like you're never closer to your creator than when you're creating. So like that moment of creating something new is such a precious thing that, and I don't want to take it for granted. So I don't want to write a song that's just, kind of a jokey song, or has no real meaning behind it, but it's fun and it sounds fun. So, and that's probably to the detriment. That's probably one of the reasons we aren't a pop sensation.
Yes.
But yeah, so we started with a 6-piece folk rock band. We had a ton of success with that. We toured a lot, got to play a lot of cool festivals, meet a lot of my heroes, and that was all folk songs are all stories. Like everybody in the folk genre writes story songs. But then with By Light We Loom, it's just the two of us, and so we started getting into electronic music. So we do synthesizer stuff, electronic stuff. And most electronic-y dancey music is not story-based, but I couldn't leave that behind. So that's kind of been our niche. It makes us a little unique. And so when we play a show, a live show, we tell the stories before we play a song. Every single song has a story associated with it. So it becomes kind of a storytelling and a song thing.
Yes.
And we didn't used to do that. Every once in a while we share a story, but what we started to realize is when we do, somebody else is going through something similar to what we went through. And then they come up to you afterwards, they connect, and you connect with somebody on a personal human level. And you get to talk about the hard stuff and talk about the healing. Like that is the purpose of music in my mind. And so storytelling just I guess is kind of the accelerant of that. It makes that connection a little more profound, a little more direct.
Yeah.
So there's always a question we ask every guest, and the question is this. I mean, it's clear you're a very effective teacher, you're a very effective musician. What do you think was your hardest lesson that you had to learn in life in order to succeed as the person you've become, as a musician, as a teacher? When you think back over your life, what is the moment that you learned something that you are now using to really make an impact on your community?
Yeah, I think it really boils down to an understanding of self-worth, that I have value, and feeling the sense that I need to be faithful with that value. I was given that value to give it back to other people. So that leads to a commitment, to me, that is not optional, to the things I do. They're all calls on my life. So that self-worth, I think, started in childhood. Started with conversations with my mother and conversations with my father, where I remember my mom still to this day has a stupid poem I wrote called Trees. And she loves telling this story where, like, I couldn't write anything for a week, and I was so upset. I needed to write a poem for that class. And then my mom said, why don't you just write about something you see? I was like, what? She said, trees. Okay. And I wrote it in like 5 minutes. And she thinks it's the best poem of all time. It's hanging on her wall. And so like those moments where she celebrated the small things, that's a part of that lesson. I lost that lesson, I think, in middle school and high school. I struggled mightily with seeing myself through other people's eyes, and seeing that I was worthless. I think I'm not alone in struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts in that time. And that was, my self-worth was gone. Like I, late in high school, struggled with alcohol. I would have a few shots of vodka before school every day. So I fell into that kind of cycle, and things got really, really dark there for a long time. So, and I didn't find that self-worth again until it was shown to me pretty profoundly through understanding who I was in Christ. And so that lesson has poured into everything I do. Like I'm here for a reason. You know, I always, my students hate it, but when they're leaving the class, I always say the same thing. I always say, you're the only you that will ever exist. So you got to be yourself.
That's fabulous.
And so to me, like that's the call on my life. Like I'm the only me, and God has a purpose. And so when I do music, I got to do it to the best of my ability, and I got to be authentic to me. When I do education, I gotta approach it the same way. And I think it's a lesson I'm still learning. You know, there are days where I feel worthless. There are days where I feel like, you know, I think we all kind of struggle with this sometimes. Like, but what business do I have doing these things? You know, like,
Yeah.
who am I to be in any sort of authority? You know, but just kind of pushing those thoughts aside and recognizing yours. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you so much, Eric, for bringing your passion and your craft to Soul Teachers. This was really, really a fascinating time for me to hear from a teacher who loves as much as you do. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure. I'm excited to be a part of Soul Teachers. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for joining me in Soul Teachers. This episode was directed by Amy Wagner, produced by Andy Callender, edited by Brandon Fairbanks, and researched by Dr. Eric Bishop. Our theme music, Born, is by Over the Rhine. Our website, www.thesoulteachers.com, was built by Each and Every, a design company in Kent, Ohio. You can find us wherever podcasts are hosted. We hope you'll like us on Facebook at The Soul Teachers. You can follow us on Twitter at teachers_soul. I am your host, Stephen Denlinger.